Jessica Torres made a lot of questionable decisions at 3 in the morning. Usually they involved adding things to her online shopping cart that she absolutely did not need. A bread maker shaped like a spaceship, glow-in-the-dark toilet paper, 17 different flavors of instant ramen. But this particular Tuesday night, scrolling through targeted ads while avoiding her actual work responsibilities, she stumbled upon something called the Galactic Ancestry DNA Kit. The ad promised to trace her lineage across the stars, find out if her great-great-grandfather was a Martian colonist, discover exotic heritage from the Outer Rim territories, connect with distant relatives on asteroid mining stations. It was marked down from 200 credits to 79, and the wine she had been drinking made that seem like an absolute bargain. She clicked purchase before her rational brain could intervene. The kit arrived 4 days later in discreet packaging, which should have been her first warning sign. Inside was a simple collection tube and instructions in 47 languages, most of which looked like geometric shapes having an argument. The English instructions were refreshingly simple. Spit in tube, seal tube, mail tube. Wait 3 to 4 weeks for results that would probably reveal she was disappointingly average. Jessica did as instructed and promptly forgot about the entire thing. 3 weeks later, she was elbow-deep in spreadsheets, trying to explain to her boss why the quarterly projections looked like a drunk person had plotted them, when her apartment intercom buzzed with the kind of urgency usually reserved for emergencies. She ignored it. It buzzed again, and then someone just held the button down for 30 straight seconds. "What?" she snapped into the speaker. "Miss Torres, this is Kel from the Interstellar Genetic Registry. We need to speak with you immediately. It is a matter of galactic security." Jessica looked at her coffee, looked at her computer screen, looked at the time, which read 2:15 on a perfectly normal Thursday afternoon. She pressed the button. "Is this about a warranty extension? Because I'm really not interested. Miss Torres, I am standing outside your building. I have 17 armed security personnel with me and a direct line to the Galactic Council. Please let me in before this becomes an interstellar incident." That got her attention. 5 minutes later, a very sweaty alien stood in her living room, holding a tablet that kept making distressing beeping noises. Kel was about 4 feet tall, green, and looked like someone had crossed a frog with the anxiety disorder. His skin glistened with nervous moisture, and his 3-fingered hands shook as he scrolled through whatever was on his screen. "Miss Torres," he began, his voice cracking slightly. "When you submitted your DNA sample to our database, it triggered protocols that have not been activated in 200 years. "Okay," Jessica said slowly. "Is this about the cookie I ate at the office party? Because I didn't know it was genetically modified." "This is significantly more serious." Kel pulled up a holographic display that made her coffee table look like a command center. "Your genetic markers match 94% with a species we believe to be extinct. A species that was, and I cannot stress this enough, asked to leave civilized space due to being absolutely terrifying." Jessica stared at him, then at the hologram, then back at him. "You're telling me I paid 79 credits to find out I'm descended from space monsters?" "The Vorathians were not monsters," Kel corrected, though his tone suggested he was not entirely convinced of this. "They were apex predators who made every other species in the galaxy deeply uncomfortable, and according to this, humans are their direct descendants." "Fantastic," Jessica said, sitting down heavily on her couch. "I was hoping for like 2% interesting alien DNA. Maybe a fun fact about distant cousins on Europa. Not space war criminal ancestry." Kel's tablet beeped again, more urgently this time. He looked at it and his skin somehow got even more sweaty. "Miss Torres, the Galactic Council has requested your immediate presence. They are currently debating whether Earth should be quarantined, monitored, or preemptively neutralized." "Neutralized?" "It is the diplomatic term for reasons I am not authorized to elaborate on." Jessica looked around her apartment. At her half-eaten breakfast, her unmade bed visible through the bedroom door, the pile of laundry that had achieved sentience sometime last week. "Do I have time to pack?" "No." Cool. Just let me grab my phone." The ship Kel brought her to was less impressive than she expected and more nauseating than she hoped. The interior looked like an office building had merged with a spaceship, and neither side was happy about it. Fluorescent lighting hummed overhead, casting everything in a sickly blue tint. The walls were covered in signs written in dozens of languages, all of which seemed to be variations of "Please do not panic," and evacuation routes are clearly marked. Kel led her through a maze of corridors while other aliens stopped and stared. A tall being made entirely of crystalline structures actually dropped the tablet they were holding. A small, furry creature with too many eyes took one look at Jessica and scurried into a supply closet. By the third hallway, she noticed that everyone was giving them a very wide berth. "Is it always like this?" she asked. "No," Kel admitted. "Usually people are less obvious about their terror." They ended up in what Kel called a briefing room, but what Jessica would have called a panic room. The walls were reinforced metal. There were no windows. A single table sat in the center, with chairs that looked designed for species with vastly different anatomies than humans. Kel gestured for her to sit in something that was probably a chair if she tilted her head and squinted. "All right," Jessica said, wedging herself into the furniture. "Explain to me why everyone is treating me like I'm about to go feral and start biting people." Kel pulled up his tablet and began swiping through files with the kind of manic energy usually reserved for people delivering very bad news. The Vorathians first made contact with the galactic community approximately 400 years ago. Initial diplomatic relations were promising. They seemed friendly, curious, and eager to establish trade. "Okay, that sounds good." It stopped being good very quickly. Kel pulled up an image that looked like a historical painting. The first incident occurred when a Vorathian diplomat attended a council meeting and mentioned their species engaged in something called persistence hunting. The idea that they would chase prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion made the herbivore species physically ill. "That's just running," Jessica said. "We do that for exercise." That was their explanation as well. It did not help. Kel swiped to another image. The second incident involved their recreational activities. They showed the council footage of what they called sports, competitions that involved deliberately colliding with each other at high speeds, striking each other with implements, and something called boxing, where they would punch each other in the face until someone fell down. "For fun," Jessica added helpfully. "For fun," Kel confirmed, looking ill. The council members could not comprehend why anyone would voluntarily sustain injury for entertainment. He kept swiping, and each image was worse than the last. Vorathians climbing sheer cliff faces without safety equipment. Vorathians jumping out of aircraft with nothing but fabric to slow their descent. Vorathians diving into water with predatory creatures specifically to observe them. But the final straw, Kel said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, was the revelation about their pack bonding tendencies. Pack bonding? The Vorathians had a habit of adopting dangerous predators as companions. They would take apex predators from hostile environments, bring them into their homes, and treat them as family members. The council watched footage of Vorathian children sleeping next to creatures that could kill them with a single bite. Jessica thought about her neighbor's pit bull who wore sweaters and was afraid of thunderstorms. She thought about her aunt's cat who had once brought down a hawk. She decided not to mention any of this. "So they were friendly but intimidating," she said instead. "They were accidentally the most terrifying species anyone had ever encountered," Kel corrected. Every attempt at cultural exchange resulted in the other species developing trauma responses. The Vorathians kept insisting they were peaceful, but their very existence was an act of psychological warfare. What happened to them? Kel pulled up a final document, this one marked with about 17 different security clearances. 200 years ago, they held a meeting with the Galactic Council. According to records, the Vorathians expressed concern that their presence was causing distress. They proposed a solution. They would leave. Just like that. Just like that. They loaded up a colony ship, refused to disclose their destination, and vanished from known space. The general assumption was they found some isolated sector to settle where they would not accidentally terrify their neighbors. Kel looked at her meaningfully. "Until your DNA test, we had no idea where they went." Just like that? Jessica felt understanding dawn with all the subtlety of a brick through a window. You think they came to Earth? Miss Torres, Earth is in an isolated section of the galaxy that was marked as uninhabitable due to the local star's radiation patterns. It would be the perfect place for a species trying to hide from the rest of the galaxy. And if humans are 94% genetically identical to Vorathians, then either convergent evolution worked over time or Earth is exactly where they went. But humans aren't terrifying, Jessica protested. We're just people. Kel pulled up a new file on his tablet and turned it toward her. It was a comparison chart. On one side, Vorathian traits. On the other, human traits. The overlap was damning. Persistence hunting, check. Humans literally invented the marathon. Recreational violence, check. Every human sport involved either hitting something or hitting someone. Pack bonding with apex predators, check. Dogs and cats. Exploration of hazardous environments, check. Humans had been to the bottom of the ocean and the vacuum of space just to see what was there. Consumption of toxic substances for pleasure, check. Alcohol, caffeine, capsaicin. The list went on for 3 pages. Oh, Jessica said quietly. We're the space orcs, aren't we? You are the space orcs, Kel confirmed. And the Galactic Council is currently in emergency session, trying to decide what to do about it. The council chamber looked like someone had designed a courthouse specifically to intimidate people. The ceiling stretched up at least 50 feet, covered in a holographic display of the galaxy that slowly rotated above their heads. Seats arranged in a semicircle faced a central platform where Jessica currently stood, feeling like she was on trial for crimes her ancestors may or may not have committed. There were about 30 council members present, representing species she had never seen before and probably would never see again if they decided to quarantine Earth. Each one looked at her with expressions ranging from fear to curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Admiral Torque spoke first. He was a bird-like creature, easily 7 feet tall with iridescent feathers and eyes that tracked her every movement. When he spoke, his beak clacked with each syllable in a way that made Jessica think of very angry chickens. Miss Torres, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I must ask you several questions about human capabilities and intentions. Please answer honestly, as the fate of your entire species depends on your cooperation. No pressure then, Jessica muttered. Torque's feathers ruffled in what might have been annoyance. First question, is it true that humans engage in persistence hunting? I mean, we used to. Now we mostly just order delivery and complain about having to walk to the mailbox. But you are capable of it. Technically, yes. We have people who run ultramarathons for fun. That's like 100 miles or something. The council chamber erupted in disturbed murmuring. A blob-like creature that Jessica assumed was Chancellor Vim rippled in distress. They run for recreation, Vim said, their voice emanating from somewhere within their gelatinous body. They voluntarily exhaust themselves beyond normal limits as entertainment. It's good cardio, Jessica offered weakly. Admiral Torque held up a wing for silence. Second question, do humans maintain apex predators in their living spaces? Jessica thought about how to answer this. We call them pets, and they're mostly domesticated. Like my neighbor has a dog who's afraid of vacuum cleaners. But they are descended from predatory species. Well, yeah, dogs came from wolves. Cats are basically tiny murder machines, but they're friendly murder machines. We feed them and they let us pet them. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. Head scientist Renna leaned forward in her seat. She was reptilian, covered in dark green scales, with eyes that gleamed with unsettling interest. Fascinating. You have formed symbiotic relationships with creatures that could theoretically harm you. What benefit does this provide? Emotional support, Jessica tried. They're cute and fluffy and they make us happy. You risk physical harm for emotional satisfaction, Renna clarified, making notes on a tablet with disturbing enthusiasm. When you put it like that, it sounds worse than it is. Admiral Torque continued. Third question, human recreational activities. We have reviewed archived Vorathian footage. Do humans still engage in competitive combat sports? You mean like boxing and MMA? Yeah, we do. But there are rules and safety regulations and medical staff on standby. You strike each other repeatedly in the head. Only in designated areas with appropriate protective equipment and consent from all parties involved. Why? Jessica paused. That was actually a good question. Because it's exciting? Because we like testing our limits? Because evolutionarily we're built for physical confrontation, and modern society doesn't provide enough outlets for that, so we channel it into organized sports? The council stared at her in collective horror. Chancellor Vim spoke up, their voice taking on a philosophical tone. So you are acknowledging that humans possess inherent aggressive tendencies that require recreational violence to manage? I mean, when you phrase it like that, it sounds bad. But we also do yoga and meditation and paint happy little trees. We're not all about the violence. But the violence is present, Torque pressed. The capacity for violence is present, Jessica corrected. Most humans go their entire lives without punching anyone. We're actually pretty peaceful when you get down to it. Rena made more notes. But you maintain the capability and the instinct, merely suppressed through social conditioning. That's literally every species ever, Jessica said, starting to get frustrated. I'm sure you all have conflict resolution mechanisms that involve some level of aggression. That's just how evolution works. We do not consume poison for pleasure. A small furry delegate squeaked from the back row. What? Admiral Torque pulled up a holographic display showing various human foods. Our research indicates humans voluntarily ingest toxic substances, capsaicin from peppers, ethanol in alcoholic beverages, caffeine in stimulant drinks. These are literal poisons that you consume recreationally. Jessica rubbed her temples. Okay, yes, technically those are toxins. But in small amounts they're harmless, and they taste good, or make us feel good. It's not like we're chugging bleach for fun. You are building tolerance to harmful substances as a form of entertainment, Rena said, absolutely delighted by this information. Remarkable. Your species actively trains itself to resist toxins. We really don't think about it that much, Jessica said. We just like spicy food and coffee. It's not some grand evolutionary strategy. Chancellor Vim rippled again. Intent is irrelevant. The behavior demonstrates a fundamental comfort with discomfort that other species find deeply disturbing. Admiral Torque shuffled through more files on his display. Additional concerning behaviors include what humans call extreme sports. Jumping from aircraft, scaling vertical surfaces, deliberately placing yourselves in proximity to dangerous fauna for observation purposes. Those are outliers, Jessica protested. Most humans spend their free time watching television and scrolling through social media. We're actually pretty boring on average. Yet the capability exists within your species, Torque countered. And if historical records are accurate, Vorathians also claim to be peaceful while simultaneously exhibiting these exact same behavioral patterns. Jessica was starting to understand why the Vorathians had left. Trying to explain human behavior to species who found it genuinely horrifying was like trying to convince someone that your pet tarantula was actually very friendly. Technically true, but the context was too alien for the explanation to land. Look, she said, I get that we're weird. I understand that our idea of fun looks like a threat assessment to you. But humans are not interested in conquering the galaxy or terrorizing other species. We just want to exist and do our thing, and maybe make some friends who will appreciate our cooking, and not ask too many questions about why we think horror movies are entertaining. You watch recordings of fictional violence for enjoyment? Someone asked from the upper seats. Jessica closed her eyes. We are getting so quarantined. The council erupted into debate. Half wanted Earth immediately isolated. A quarter wanted extensive monitoring and probationary status. The remaining quarter was split between preemptive action and cautiously optimistic scientific study. Voices rose in multiple languages and frequencies, creating a cacophony that made Jessica's head throb. And then the alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the chamber. A mechanical voice announced something in a language Jessica did not understand, but the tone was universal. That was definitely a "we are under attack" announcement. The council members immediately began panicking in their species-specific ways. Torque's feathers puffed up to twice his normal size. Vim jiggled frantically. Rena's tail whipped back and forth. Various delegates were attempting to either hide under their seats or flee the chamber entirely. Kel appeared at Jessica's side, breathing hard. "Krelok's raiders, they breached the station hull in Sector 7. They are coming for the genetic registry database." "Of course they are," Jessica said. "Why would anything about this day be simple?" "The security team is responding, but the Kreloks are heavily armed and highly motivated. We need to evacuate the council to a secure location." Jessica looked around at the panicking delegates, looked at the exits that were currently jammed with bodies trying to force their way through, looked at Kel's terrified face, and then she did what humans do best when faced with danger and poor decision-making opportunities. She ran toward the problem instead of away from it. Before the alarms and the chaos, before Jessica had made the questionable decision to charge toward armed space pirates, there had been a brief period of waiting. The council had recessed to debate her fate in private, leaving her in an adjacent chamber with nothing but uncomfortable furniture and mounting anxiety. That was when Rena had found her. The scientist had slipped in through a side door, moving with surprising stealth for someone with scales and a tail. She carried a datapad and wore the expression of someone about to do something they were definitely not authorized to do. "Miss Torres," she had said, "would you like to see the real historical records, as opposed to the fake ones? As opposed to the sanitized diplomatic versions the council reviewed?" Rena's eyes gleamed with academic rebellion. "I have access to the restricted archives, the actual footage of Vorathian culture, not the carefully edited highlights designed to justify their exile." Jessica had about 3 seconds to decide if following a strange alien scientist into a restricted area was a good idea. She decided that her day could not possibly get worse. She was wrong, but at that moment she did not know that yet. The restricted archives were hidden behind about 17 security doors and at least 3 biometric scanners that Rena bypassed with the casual efficiency of someone who did this regularly. They ended up in a small room filled with old technology and dust, illuminated by a single flickering light. Rena pulled up files on an ancient display screen. "This is the actual first contact footage, unedited." The video showed a group of Vorathians meeting with council representatives 200 years ago. They looked almost exactly like humans. Bipedal, roughly the same size, similar facial features. If Jessica had passed them on a street, she would have assumed they were just people from a different ethnic background. The Vorathians in the footage were smiling, offering gifts, attempting to establish communication. They looked friendly, harmless even, and the council representatives looked absolutely terrified. "Watch this part," Rena said, fast-forwarding to a specific timestamp. A Vorathian delegate was explaining something, using hand gestures for emphasis. The universal translator captured the words. "Our people enjoy physical challenges. We climb mountains, we explore deep waters, we test ourselves against our environment." The council representatives had gone very still. "As hobbies?" one had asked. "As recreation," the Vorathian confirmed cheerfully. "We find it fulfilling to push our limits and explore dangerous places. It helps us understand our capabilities." The camera caught the exact moment the council realized what they were dealing with. The expressions shifted from diplomatic interest to poorly concealed horror. Rena paused the video. They were not trying to be threatening. They genuinely thought this was normal behavior. "It is normal behavior," Jessica said. "For us, anyway." "Exactly." Rena pulled up another file. "This is footage from a cultural exchange program. The Vorathians invited council observers to their homeworld." The video showed a Vorathian city. It looked surprisingly Earth-like. Buildings, streets, parks, normal civilization. And then the camera panned to a recreation area where Vorathians were engaged in various activities. A group was rock climbing without ropes. Another was engaged in a full contact sport that looked like rugby mixed with parkour. A third was having an eating competition featuring foods that the translation notes indicated were mildly toxic to Vorathians. "They are eating poison," an observer's voice said off camera, sounding faint. "For a competition, with prizes. The winner gets a trophy and bragging rights," a Vorathian guide explained helpfully. "It is quite popular." The observer had apparently fainted at that point because the camera tilted wildly before cutting off. Jessica watched more footage, Vorathians keeping large predators as pets. Vorathians showing off their collection of weapons that they used for sport. Vorathians explaining their concept of extreme activities, which included jumping out of aircraft, diving to crushing ocean depths, and something called volcano surfing that was exactly what it sounded like. They really were just like us, Jessica said quietly. Genetically and culturally identical, Rena confirmed, which is why your DNA test caused such panic. If humans are Vorathian descendants, then Earth has been quietly developing an entire civilization of apex predators in isolation for 2 centuries. We are not apex predators, Jessica protested. We are just people who like spicy food and occasionally do stupid things for entertainment. That is exactly what the Vorathians said. Rena pulled up another file. This is from their final council appearance, the meeting where they proposed leaving. The video showed an older Vorathian female standing before the council. She looked tired and sad. "We have tried," she said, her voice heavy with resignation. "We have explained our culture, adapted our behavior, compromised our traditions. But we cannot change what we are. Our very existence causes you distress. We are peaceful, but you see only predators. We are curious, but you see only recklessness. We offer friendship, but you can only perceive threat." The council chamber in the video was silent. "So we will leave," the Vorathian continued. "We will find somewhere isolated, somewhere we can live without causing fear. Perhaps in time, if we change enough, we can return. But for now, we understand we are not welcome here." The video ended. Jessica felt something twist in her chest. They left because they were kind. They could have stayed. They could have demanded acceptance. But they left because they did not want to make anyone uncomfortable. "Yes," Rena said, "and according to our tracking, their colony ship headed toward this sector of space, toward a system with a young planet that showed signs of developing life, but was considered too dangerous for settlement due to stellar radiation and volatile weather patterns." "Earth," Jessica said. "Earth," Rena confirmed. "They found a planet that matched their risk tolerance and environmental preferences. They settled there, and over 200 years they became human. Adapted to local conditions, developed regional variations, forgot their spacefaring past. But the core traits remained. The curiosity, the endurance, the pack bonding, the recreational risk-taking. So humans are not actually native to Earth? That is unclear. The timeline suggests the Vorathians may have integrated with existing early hominid populations rather than displacing them. Genetic drift over 200 years with environmental pressures could account for the 6% variation. You are both Vorathian descendants and Earth natives." Jessica processed this. "And now the Council knows Earth exists, knows what we are, and has to decide whether we are a threat." "Correct. What do you think they will decide?" Rena had looked at her with those unsettling reptilian eyes. "I think it depends on whether you can prove that humans learned something the Vorathians never managed." That being accidentally terrifying does not mean being actually dangerous. That was when the alarms had started. And that was when Jessica remembered that humans might be apex predators, but they were also very good at improvising under pressure. Jessica ran toward the sound of weapons fire with nothing but a fire extinguisher she had yanked off the wall and a very questionable understanding of her own mortality. Kel was screaming something behind her about protocols and proper evacuation procedures, but she was already committed to what was possibly the worst decision of her life. The Krelox raiders were in the main corridor leading to the genetic registry. There were 5 of them, each about 6 feet tall, covered in chitinous armor that looked both organic and technological. They moved with the efficient precision of professionals who did this sort of thing regularly. Jessica did not have a plan. She had adrenaline and a fire extinguisher and a lifetime of watching action movies that had taught her absolutely nothing useful about actual combat. She hit the first raider with a blast of foam directly in what she assumed was its face. The creature reeled back, clawing at its sensory organs. The others turned toward her, weapons rising. "Okay," Jessica said to no one in particular. "This is how I die." Kel appeared beside her, holding what looked like a tablet, but was apparently some kind of energy weapon. He fired at the ceiling above the raiders, bringing down a shower of sparks and debris. Not lethal, but definitely distracting. "We need to seal the corridor," He shouted over the alarms. "The emergency bulkheads can contain them." "Where are the controls?" "Access panel, 20 feet behind them." "Of course it is." Jessica had never been in a real fight before. Her combat experience consisted of one self-defense class in college that she had mostly used to meet the gym credit requirement. But she had been a decent athlete in high school, and she had watched her brother play way too much hockey, and humans had this really unfortunate instinct to just commit when the situation got weird. She charged. The second raider swung at her with an appendage that had too many joints. She ducked under it, more from luck than skill, and slammed the fire extinguisher into what might have been a knee. The creature stumbled. She kept moving. Kel was providing covering fire, his weapon making noises that sounded more like angry electronics than actual gunshots. He was not hitting much, but he was making the raiders split their attention. Jessica reached the access panel. Of course it was locked. Of course it required some kind of biometric scan that she did not have. Of course the instructions were in a language that looked like angry geometry. The third raider was coming toward her. She looked at the fire extinguisher, looked at the access panel, looked at the raider. She threw the extinguisher at the raider's head and slammed her fist into the access panel as hard as she could. Pain exploded through her hand. The panel cracked, and somehow, miraculously, the emergency bulkhead started closing. The raiders realized what was happening and tried to retreat. But Kel had gotten creative with his shooting and had managed to damage the floor plating beneath them. They were stumbling, off balance, and the bulkhead was descending with the slow inevitability of bureaucratic machinery. Jessica grabbed Kel and pulled him back toward the council chamber. The bulkhead sealed with a heavy metallic thunk, trapping the raiders on the other side. Silence fell, broken only by the alarms and Jessica's ragged breathing. "Did we just," Kel started, then stopped. "Did we just successfully repel a Krellox raiding party using a fire extinguisher and improvised tactics?" "I think we did," Jessica said, looking at her bleeding knuckles. "That was the stupidest thing I have ever done. That was the bravest thing I have ever seen." They stumbled back into the council chamber where the delegates were slowly emerging from hiding. Admiral Torque approached them, feathers still ruffled but eyes sharp with assessment. "You ran toward the danger," he said to Jessica. "Yes. You engaged armed hostiles with improvised weapons." "Yes. You sustained injury to save the council and protect the genetic database." "I mostly just panicked and kept moving forward," Jessica admitted. "It was not strategic. It was just stupid human instinct." Torque studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to address the council. "I have spent the last hour arguing that humans are too dangerous to integrate into galactic society, that their predatory instincts and reckless behavior make them a threat. And then this human ran directly into danger to protect strangers of species she had never met before. She did not calculate odds or consider personal safety. She simply acted." Chancellor Vim rippled forward. "The Vorathians did the same thing. Historical records show they would intervene in conflicts that did not concern them, protect beings they had no obligation toward. We interpreted it as aggression. Perhaps we were wrong." Rena pushed through the crowd, still clutching her datapad. "I propose an alternative interpretation of human behavior. They are not aggressive. They are protective. The persistence hunting is endurance. The recreational violence is controlled practice. The pack bonding is loyalty. The risk-taking is courage. We have been viewing their traits through a lens of fear, but those same traits could be valuable." "Valuable how?" someone asked skeptically. "The galaxy has become complacent," Rena said. "We avoid conflict. We flee danger. We prioritize safety over growth. Perhaps we need a species that runs toward problems instead of away from them." Admiral Torque clicked his beak thoughtfully. "The raiding parties have increased in the past decade. The Krellox, the Vex Collective, even the supposedly civilized Merchants Guild has been pushing boundaries. We have responded with appeasement and retreat." "Because we are not warriors," Vim said. "We are diplomats and scholars and merchants." "And humans are both," Jessica offered, still catching her breath. "We can be peaceful. We can be diplomatic. We can appreciate art and philosophy and all that good stuff. But when necessary, we can also be incredibly stubborn and willing to fight. Not because we want to, but because sometimes that is what the situation requires." She looked around at the assembled council members. The Vorathians left because they scared you. But maybe they scared you because you had never met a species that was willing to be dangerous in defense of others. They were not predators, they were protectors, and you did not understand the difference. The council was quiet. Then one of the smaller delegates spoke up. I would like to not be raided anymore. It is quite stressful. Several others murmured agreement. Chancellor Vim rippled in what might have been amusement. So the human proves herself by accidentally demonstrating exactly the traits that concern us, but in a context that makes them heroic rather than horrifying. That is very on brand for humans, Kell said, earning a surprised laugh from several delegates. Admiral Torque spread his wings in a gesture that looked official. The Council will need to deliberate, but I am prepared to recommend provisional acceptance of Earth into the galactic community, contingent on appropriate safeguards and cultural exchange programs. Safeguards like what? Jessica asked warily. Warning labels on your entertainment exports. A liaison officer to help Earth navigate galactic protocols. Regular monitoring to ensure you are not accidentally terrifying new species. And please, for the sake of everyone's mental health, do not show anyone footage of your extreme sports without extensive trigger warnings. Jessica laughed despite herself. That seems fair. The formal verdict took another 3 hours of debate, but the outcome was never really in doubt after Jessica had demonstrated the human capacity for protective recklessness. The Council voted to grant Earth provisional membership in the galactic community with a list of conditions that was both reasonable and faintly ridiculous. Humans would be allowed to engage in interstellar trade and diplomacy. They would have access to galactic databases and technology exchanges. They would be permitted to establish embassies and cultural centers on Council worlds. But all human entertainment exports had to carry warnings about content that might be disturbing to other species. This included sports, horror movies, nature documentaries, and anything involving food preparation that used heat above 200 degrees or spices rated above mild on the Scoville scale. Earth would accept a permanent liaison officer to help navigate cultural differences and prevent accidental interspecies incidents. Kell had volunteered, partially because he found humans fascinating, and partially because he had survived a combat situation with one and figured that qualified him as an expert. Humans would be required to attend mandatory sensitivity training before traveling to non-human worlds, covering topics like how not to accidentally terrify people by existing. And perhaps most importantly, humans were officially classified as a protected predator species, which meant they were recognized as potentially dangerous, but not actively hostile. It was the galactic equivalent of marking a dog as friendly, but requires experienced handler. Jessica signed the provisional agreement on behalf of Earth, which was technically beyond her authority, but no one seemed to care at this point. She suspected her government would be receiving some very confusing diplomatic communications in the near future. The Council dispersed with a mixture of relief and continued apprehension. Several delegates approached her to express gratitude for her intervention during the raiding. A few others maintained careful distance while making it clear they appreciated her actions but preferred not to get too close. Admiral Torque pulled her aside before she left. Miss Torres, he said, his feathers settling into a more relaxed position. I want to apologize. I spent most of today arguing that your species should be quarantined or worse. I let fear override reason. You weren't wrong to be cautious, Jessica said. We are kind of a lot. You are a lot, Torque agreed, but perhaps the galaxy needs a lot right now. We have become comfortable, safe, and comfort breeds complacency. The raiders knew we would not fight back effectively. They were correct. Until today. Torque clicked his beak in what might have been a smile. I am told that humans have a saying about keeping certain individuals close for strategic purposes. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. That one. I prefer to think of it as keep your friends close and your terrifying allies even closer. He extended a wing. Welcome to the galactic community, Miss Torres. Try not to give us all collective anxiety disorders. Jessica shook his wing carefully. No promises, but I will do my best. Rena intercepted her on the way to the transport dock, practically vibrating with excitement. I have been authorized to establish a xenoanthropology research program focused on human culture. I will need human consultants and research subjects and access to Earth for field studies. Would you be interested in participating? Will it involve more fire extinguishers and armed combat? Ideally, no. Mostly questionnaires and behavioral observations. Then sure, why not? My life is already weird. Rena handed her a data chip. This contains the complete historical archives on the Vorathians, everything we know about your ancestral species. I thought you might want it. Jessica took the chip, feeling its weight. 200 years of history. The story of why humans existed in isolation. The reason they had developed as they did, unaware of the greater galaxy beyond. Thank you, she said, for showing me the truth, for not treating me like a monster. You are not a monster, Rena said firmly. You are simply a human, and that is more than enough. The trip back to Earth took 6 hours. Jessica spent most of it watching the stars slide past the viewport, processing everything that had happened. She had woken up that morning as a data analyst with student loans and a mediocre apartment. She was returning home as Earth's accidental first ambassador to an interstellar civilization. Her phone had 17 missed calls from her boss. She decided those could wait. Kel sat across from her, reviewing documents on his tablet with the focused intensity of someone who had just accepted a posting to the most stressful assignment in the galaxy. I have been reading about Earth, he said without looking up. Your planet has something called Australia where apparently everything is evolved to kill you and humans just live there anyway. We do. And you have sports that involve hitting a small ball with a stick and running in circles? Baseball, yes. And you have a food called pizza that you fold in half to eat in a specific regional style that people will argue about with disturbing intensity. New York versus Chicago. It gets heated. Kel looked up from his tablet. I am going to need so much therapy. Jessica laughed. It felt good to laugh after the day she had experienced. Welcome to Earth, Kel. We will make you regret every decision that led you here, but at least the food is good. The food concerns me. I read that you put cheese on nearly everything. Cheese makes everything better. That is a universal truth. It is dairy. You should not be able to digest it past infancy. And yet here we are, putting it on pasta and pizza and burgers and just eating it straight from the package at 2 in the morning. Kel made a note on his tablet, adding lactose tolerance to the list of disturbing human adaptations. The ship dropped her off at a private spaceport outside Washington, D.C. that she had not known existed until today. Apparently, the government had been aware of alien life for about 30 years, but had decided to keep it quiet until they had a better understanding of the situation. Jessica's DNA test had forced their hand rather dramatically. 2 very serious-looking government officials met her at the landing pad. They explained that she would need to be debriefed extensively and probably testify before Congress, and definitely sign about 40 forms promising to maintain diplomatic relations and not cause any interstellar incidents. Jessica agreed to all of it with the numb exhaustion of someone who had used up their entire capacity for surprise. They drove her home at midnight. Her apartment looked exactly as she had left it that morning, which felt surreal given that her entire understanding of humanity's place in the universe had fundamentally changed. The dishes were still in the sink. The laundry was still achieving sentience. Everything was normal except that nothing would ever be normal again. She found the Ancestry Kit box in her recycling bin, pulled it out, and stared at the cheerful marketing text. Discover your galactic heritage, connect across the stars, learn where you really come from. Well, she said to her empty apartment, I certainly did that. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number using a communication protocol she did not recognize. She opened it. Official Galactic Registry update. Your ancestry results have been processed. You are 94% Vorathian apex predator, 6% Earth environmental adaptation, and 100% cleared for interstellar contact. Welcome to the galactic community. Please review the attached documentation regarding species interaction protocols and mandatory cultural sensitivity guidelines. A liaison officer will contact you within 48 hours to schedule orientation. Additional note, please do not mention the recreational poison consumption to the Delari species. They are still processing the existence of humanity, and that particular detail may cause diplomatic complications. Attached was a file marked, "Congratulations on not being quarantined, a survivor's guide to galactic diplomacy." Jessica opened her laptop and navigated to the Ancestry Company's website. They had a refer a friend program. She pulled up the link and sent it to her brother with a message that read, "Did my DNA test. Results were interesting. You should definitely do one too. Trust me." She was closing her laptop when Kel's face appeared on her screen via video call. He was standing in what looked like a hotel room, staring at something off camera with an expression of pure confusion. "Jessica," he said slowly, "why is the television showing people competing to eat as many hot dogs as possible in 10 minutes? "Oh, that is Nathan's hot dog eating contest. It is a 4th of July tradition. They are consuming cylindrical meat products at dangerous speeds for entertainment purposes. And prize money. The winner gets like $10,000. Kel was quiet for a long moment. "I'm going to need that therapy much sooner than I anticipated. Welcome to Earth, buddy. It only gets weirder from here." She ended the call and looked around her apartment one more time. Tomorrow she would deal with the government debriefings and the media attention and the fact that she had become the face of human-alien relations through a series of increasingly poor decisions. But tonight, she was just going to order pizza, watch something mindless on television, and process the fact that humans were the descendants of spacefaring apex predators who had left the galaxy because they were too accidentally intimidating to maintain diplomatic relations. Her doorbell rang. She opened it to find a delivery drone with a package. Inside was a bottle of wine with a note attached in Chancellor Vim's flowing script. "Congratulations on not getting your planet quarantined. Please enjoy this gift from the Andromedan vineyards. It is only mildly toxic to humans. We are told you enjoy that sort of thing. Regards, the Galactic Council." Jessica laughed until her sides hurt. She opened the wine, poured herself a generous glass, and raised it toward the ceiling. "To the Vorathians," she said, "for leaving so we could come back better. Or at least better at explaining ourselves." She took a sip. It was delicious, and yes, it did have a slight burn that suggested mild toxicity. She took another sip anyway because that was exactly what a human would do. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the Galactic Registry. "Status update. Your genetic profile has triggered 47 additional inquiries from various species interested in cultural exchange, research partnerships, and diplomatic relations. Also 3 marriage proposals from species who find apex predators attractive. Please respond at your earliest convenience." Additional update. The Galactic Council has established a hotline specifically for human-related incidents. It received 23 calls in the first hour. None were emergencies. They were all humans asking if aliens wanted to see pictures of their pets. Please advise your species to use discretion when sharing images of domesticated predators. The Delari representative fainted again. Jessica set down her wine and pulled up her photo gallery. She had a great picture of her neighbor's golden retriever wearing a bow tie. She sent it to the Galactic Hotline with a caption that read, "His name is Mr. Pickles and he is a very good boy." 3 seconds later, her phone exploded with responses ranging from horrified to confused, to one message that just said, "Why do you live with this creature? It has so many teeth." She responded, "For emotional support. He makes us happy." The phone went silent for a long moment. Then a single message came through from Admiral Torque himself. "Humans are going to be the death of us all, but I suspect we will be better for it. Also, Mr. Pickles is objectively adorable, and I will fight anyone who disagrees. Welcome to the galaxy, Miss Torres." Jessica smiled and settled into her couch with her mildly toxic wine and her new identity as Earth's most accidentally successful diplomat. Somewhere in the galaxy, the descendants of the Vorathians were being slowly integrated back into galactic society, and somewhere on Earth, millions of humans went about their daily lives completely unaware that they were considered terrifying apex predators by the rest of the known universe. She pulled up the Ancestry website one more time and clicked on the company's customer service portal. She typed, "Received my results. Very thorough, maybe too thorough. Accidentally became humanity's first contact with alien civilization. Currently navigating interstellar diplomacy with no training or preparation. Also started a minor panic about recreational poison consumption and pet ownership. Overall, would recommend your service, but maybe include a disclaimer about potential galactic consequences. 5 stars. She hit submit and closed her laptop. Tomorrow would bring government agencies and media circuses and the overwhelming responsibility of representing an entire species to a galaxy that found them both fascinating and terrifying. But tonight, Jessica Torres was just going to finish her wine, text her brother about that DNA kit, and maybe watch some nature documentaries. After all, if the galaxy thought humans were scary now, wait until they found out about David Attenborough calmly narrating lion hunts while sitting 3 feet away from said lions. That was a diplomatic incident for another day. She raised her glass one more time. To humanity. We might be space orcs, but at least we are friendly space orcs who will share our pizza and protect our friends and run toward danger with nothing but fire extinguishers and poor impulse control. The galaxy has no idea what it just accepted into the community. Her phone buzzed one final time. It was from Kel. I just witnessed someone put pineapple on pizza and the locals are arguing about whether this is acceptable. Jessica, your species is chaos incarnate. I am both horrified and strangely fascinated. Is this normal? She typed back. That is the most normal thing about us. Wait until you try the deep-fried butter at the state fair. His response was just a series of question marks and what she assumed was the alien equivalent of a horrified emoji. Jessica settled deeper into her couch and smiled. Humanity had joined the galactic community. The galaxy was never going to be the same. And honestly, neither was she. But at least the wine was good, even if it was trying to kill her just a little bit.